this preparedness amongst the community of communities organized to assist in disaster. And prior to getting involved with that, my history goes back to when I was on the city commission, and one of the last actions I got to do was make a motion to declare that we were in a climate emergency here in Gainesville. And we were the first community in the state to do that proclamation. And hey, Warren, welcome back. And then the county shortly followed that. Following that proclamation that we were in a climate emergency, again, as I was starting to tell you earlier, was that it's not that the sky is falling kind of doom and gloom about being in a climate emergency, but that we as in Florida, we get to see things that people who are in other areas of disasters with fires and tornadoes, we get weeks advance notice. We have had the repeating cycle of hurricanes that we know every year what to expect when we get into hurricane season. So shortly after I was on the city commission, COVID came, my term expired out, but I continued to meet up with people who had been active in the community with climate change conversations. And one of those communities was this group called Building Community in a Changing Climate. And that just fit right in with where I was feeling as a member of this church, for one thing, because I see this church is so involved in the community in so many ways. And I've often thought about what would we do if we were a uniting churches of Gainesville? Because building community in a changing climate comes down to that idea of a larger community than what we have here. And joining that type of development in the community to recognize that if there is a disaster, one of the most important things we need to know is who can help us. We have to take care of ourselves first, but then we need to know who else in our community, our neighbors, our family would need assistance. So I have a chart that's passing around that talks about the capabilities that would be needed during a time of disaster for each of you to kind of think about when you see, like last year with the hurricanes that we had, we were pretty well protected here, but we had so many homes and families that lost their housing. And it wasn't discussed in the news very much. So if you don't see it, you just thought it was all along the coastline. And along the coastline, they're still in recovery. So with this community, building community in a changing climate, we had been working with reaching out to talk about climate issues, and we've participated with several of the climate summits that had been going on over the last few years. But a year and a half ago, the Alachua County Emergency Management Department started promoting a thing called COAD. And that's what's been trending across the nation with the fires that have been going on, the flooding that's been going on, the hurricanes that have been going on. Up along the Panhandle and in Louisiana, Katrina's efforts had really put that out where people were needing to get organized to be active in disaster. Because what happens in the middle of the disaster, people show up to want to help. And that's the worst time to try to organize. So get people together before the disaster, the year after they felt traumatized by seeing what was happening and they wanted to know what they could do to help. Get them ready for the next hurricane where they're able to say, I can do this, I can make a phone call, I can donate money, I can work at a distribution center and help hand out the foods, I can make a trip to Cedar Key and help with food distribution. We all have different abilities. One of the biggest things that we found we needed were phone calls to be made. So here we are, we're preparing now for the season, and that we are in a climate change. We're recognizing that that is happening. So what do we do to prepare for it? Right now is a great time to be looking around your own yard, if you know somebody in the neighborhood who could use some help, but looking for those items that could become flying missiles and collect them together. I'm working on doing that at my own house because I'm a collector of things, and Flo will tell you, I've got too many bikes in the backyard. They're going to go flying across the sky with a witch riding on it. But these are the things that you could be doing now to be prepared. When there is that disaster that happens, who is the first to arrive? And it'll be your public works, your 911 people, the emergency management people. And they'll be able to respond to some of the things that are identified. This is a good list. I apologize for being nervous. As much as I talk in front of people, I still get nervous every time. But the county emergency management, they'll be the first to respond. And we've got a lot of non-governmental agencies that are also very active in this area and respond. And we tend to be an area that covers more of a regional reach because of the coastal areas that are pretty low in government assistance, that we are often the ones that have a surplus of services and people who can go and volunteer. And I know all of us have been on the highway when there's been a disaster, that we see those trucks from utility companies and emergency service providers going up and down the highway to get to wherever they are needed. They are all doing emergency management planning for hurricanes year round. And that is what our local COAD is doing now. We meet once a month to put together training and identify who's got the resources to assist according to what need is identified. We just added on a second part of our COAD, the LTRG, which means the Long-Term Recovery Group. We're going to be a nonprofit that we can actually collect funds under the United Way. They're our fiduciary resource because, again, when there's a disaster, the things that are needed include materials and money. The other thing we're doing is coordinating with the food banks and making sure that they're available. And we do so much here at UCG already, providing food. But when a disaster happens, that's where we might need people to assist at being a location. Last year when Helen hit, there was a church in Newberry that was preparing food to distribute to places in the community, and our COAD group was asked if we had people who could go and help with that. At that time, the COAD community remains a committee membership of one, where I'm actively seeking like-minded people to just say maybe. You know, it's okay to say, no, I can't help, but call me when something's going on, so that at that moment of time, if you feel like there is something that you could do to help, is what the process will be that I'll be looking to encourage. Because it's so hard to anticipate now what you might be able to do. But within our congregation, we would want to start with our membership. If you were to have a tree come down, would you need help clearing a driveway? We had one of our members who did have that happen with her. She comes back from vacation and there's a large tree covering her driveway, and she was not capable of doing it herself. And there are many others who have that same situation. What we saw with the hurricane along the coastline, the newer construction are able to survive the wind, the rain, the flooding. But communities are going through forced redevelopment with aged buildings that have not been shored up and under the construction practices. As a realtor, I can tell you that these construction practices is one of the things that's making housing so much more expensive. And that's a whole nother topic. But again, we can see all up and down the coastline, old communities that were just devastated, and the number of people who lost their housing. So who can do what? When that storm arises, again, it's the public works who will show up first, and they will do everything to clear the safety. Power lines, you know, you've heard the story, don't go out there and try to do anything if the lines are down. And they'll get out there and they'll do the things that they can take care of. Setting up shelters is one of the things we've been talking here about being able to help with, because we used to do the family promise and the interfaith hospitality. Candace King and Don Beachy have talked, neither of them are here. We've talked about looking at what we might be able to do here, because we've got the training, we've got individuals who have been used to a 24-hour, 7 days a week routine, and we might be able to be helpful if there's a point in time that shelter is needed in this county. The county is also looking at setting up contracts for long-term housing. But that's not going to be available. There's going to be a gap in time. When that disaster happens, there are going to be people who can be sheltered for the night, but then when the disaster's gone, they need assistance afterwards. So this is who can do the public works, but here again, governments just can't do it all. When I was on the city commission and I learned so much about my civic duty, one of the things that I learned is people either want government to do everything or nothing. And so I would ask them, if it's going to be nothing, what are you willing to do as your civic duty to help others? And congregations are a big part of that, who show up when there's a need. Public works can't clear private roads. They can't clear private yards, the driveways, sidewalks. They can't provide temporary housing after the school or the community center shuts down. They can't assist housing repairs of private property, but we've got Rebuilding Together who does. So your involvement with Rebuilding Together after a storm could be really helpful. And clothing, food, and emotional support. All of those things are needed following the disaster. So here's my UCG, you guys can help. Talking more about the groups that have gotten organized and trending more. It's just across the country, it's amazing how many more communities are getting involved with this effort, where the work can be. And these are the services that, if you can help just a little bit. I helped out with a couple of, the Rotary Club has a chain gang, and there was a house that had a big oak tree branches fall on the property. I wasn't going to get up there with a chainsaw, but I was able to help with trimming with my loppers. Once the big branch came down, I could trim the little stuff. I could pick up the little stuff and move it. And that's what a bunch of us old people did that day at that site. We moved the little stuff. And it's kind of like, what is it? How do you eat an elephant? Okay, you guys are good. Yeah, one branch at a time, exactly. So building community resilience, why? We've been talking as community organizers for decades, the importance of building community resilience. 20 years ago, there was a book that Peter Brokoff, I think, wrote, When the Lights Go Out. And that was talking about the threat that we had across the country, where other, we would have other countries come in and knock our grid off. And we would have communities fighting with each other over power. All these, doomsday and self-survivalists are predicting that. What it's come down to is just a simple storm may be the thing that does it. And when we see the political arena, we wonder also, how are we going to get by, and how do I know who I can trust in the community? So building community resilience, to me, is one of the most important things about faith. And how do we show our faith with God? But whatever religion it is, my basic belief is that we are here to be good to one another. And that's what I find in this community at UCG. However known, we look at doing that. And how do we do it? How do we build community faith? So part of this conversation is now coming to the point of, where have you been when there's been an emergency? What have you felt when you're watching the news that you might be able to help in some way? What would lead you to action? Eric. Mike. Thank you. You can get it.
I think what would lead me to action is just getting a phone call. Somebody calling up and saying, "Hey, Eric, can you come over and, chainsaw this, tree out of my driveway?" And, okay, sure, no problem. I'll be there. I mean, just knowing about stuff. So that's that network that you're talking
The
about building.
knowledge.
That's, I mean, like a disaster happens. I'm sure somebody at UCG during a hurricane is going to have some sort of, issue. And so, but yeah, who do they call? And then once they call that person, does that person have a list of people who say, "Oh yeah, I can help out"? So yeah, but just getting that phone call, that's what starts it off.
So I've been in touch with David Evans, who had helped organize, like over the years during COVID, the church has had an in-house congregation list of who might need a call if there was an emergency hurricane, and who would be available to make phone calls. So we had that old-fashioned phone tree that was set up. Is there anybody in this room here that was on that phone call list from before? Would you be interested in being on the phone call, either as somebody who would make a call or somebody who would want to call? Okay. Okay. So there are these sheets that are here, and if there's not enough for everybody, if you would sign a sheet with your name saying, like there's a thing there about phone calls, to be able to say that you're available to make a call or that you would want to be a call. As I was putting the items together on this list, there's like 5 pages of what your capabilities are and what you would want, and I just kind of selected a short list. But if you can see something where you would be available to assist, that would be great. David?
Yeah, I've been a Pepper for years. There's a Pepper group I'm part of. And so the first thing you can do to help your community is try to not need help yourself.
Okay.
Your place is secure. You've cleaned the trees out. You've removed all the stuff. But the more that you are not part of the problem, it allows the limited resources that the county and the state can provide to help the people who really do need help. And the second thing is, during the emergency itself, if you're not going out to be part of the solution, stay out of the way, right? And I mean, 2 little, vignettes of stories is I remember, again, I'm relatively new to Florida, but just hearing, I forget which storm it was that came ashore in Fort Myers, and hearing these news reports that when they had this video of people being rescued, they said, "Oh, thank you. We haven't had any food in 3 days." Did you have nothing in your house? They've just been isolated in their house and they had no food for 3 days. That's crazy talk. So, take care, do the provisions, get things in your house, have a generator if you want, do what you can to make sure you're not part of the problem. And the other part that shocked me was in my neighborhood, I'm out in rural Newberry, and it wasn't even a big hurricane, but storm came through, knocked over lots of trees, and I went out, and my road was completely blocked by a tree that was just massive, just across the whole thing. I said, "Oh, crap." So I went back to my house. How can I do this? I came out with my chainsaw, and by the time I got out there, an hour later, the residents had removed the tree. People with big chainsaws came, the farmers, the tractors, and it pushed it out of the way. And that's the sort of spontaneous stuff that's going to work out too. So my answer to the why is because after the big emergency, a week later, 2 weeks later, people will still need help because their houses were destroyed, their cars were destroyed, and the emergency is not over for them. And I think UCG is how we can really connect to the people who the disaster continues long after it's out of the news. And that's, I think, where the strength of the UCG community will come in, and the tree banks will really make the difference. So.
Let me get the mic to you.
One of the things that I think, other than having the committee that would calling everybody to see, are you okay, particularly like us 80-year-olds and stuff, it would be really helpful to have maybe 1, 2, or 3 people that if something happened in your community, or if you're in the outlying areas, they could call in and say, what's your problem? You know, someone in the church, what's your problem? I'm going to direct your situation to someone in there. I need chainsaw people. I have no electricity.
Exactly.
When one of the storms came through Gainesville, and so many of us have electric stoves, and we had a camper at the time. We pulled that sucker up, and my neighbor had a new baby, and we were able to warm bottles and things like that.
That's great.
Just to little things, what needs to be done, but we don't need to call every old person in the community. Let us call, I know to call 911 for certain things.
Right.
We need to have, during storm season, we need to have 1, 2, or 3 numbers on your refrigerator. If something happens, call them, and then they redirect what you need.
So there's been some other materials I've been passing around that with the COAD group, the Emergency Management Program has given us a lot of information to hand out. I've got these other materials also, like who to call. And so I'll pass these around. It's been a really interesting activity with seeing in a year, we started out with 7 congregations and we're up to 20 something that meet on a monthly basis, including the Red Cross, a group with dogs who will go and entertain you and help with your emotional support. And then the food banks, of course, with what they can provide. So I think, Nancy, what you were talking about, the how part too. And it's a matter of neighborhoods getting together also. If anybody here a member of a neighborhood association? Okay. With those groups, and our neighborhood in particular has a wonderful network of people that we exchange electric cords across the street to each other and next door according to who has power and who doesn't. But imagine the food situation when people say that they had to throw out their food. Imagine that there was a notice that at the community park, there was going to be grills and, basically have a neighborhood potluck. Bring all your food out. And it's a great time to meet everybody. Reverend Donna.
Yeah, I was one thought back. I just am compelled to tell the story of the Coral Gables Congregational Church
Okay.
during hurricane season. And it was such a well-oiled machine. I had nothing to do with it. I got there, it was already going. But it was phenomenal. It was, they had a youth group of about 100 kids. And the first thing that happened was all the kids would come to the church and start calling the entire directory, starting with people who were single and elderly, and then triaging them down. And they were trained to do it. And then they would say, can you offer or do you need?
Yeah.
Then they would staff the church where we would have potlucks, bring your dead food and we'll grill it and eat it. It was WeWork so that you could, because we had a generator, obviously, and then they turn on the computer and people could plug in. We had extension cords out into every building so people could plug in, use the electricity, use the internet, use the telephones. But the kids were in charge of it. And then when they did their first round of calling in about 6 hours, they'd get to 1,600 members.
Wow.
And they had the information. And then you'd have captains who would call, I need, and you'd call those people. And you'd have people in need who would be paired with somebody else. Did you get an answer? So it was almost like an army is the best way to put it. And people loved being a part of the army,
Peace Army.
the peace army, and the Red Cross. And it was a wonder to see. And every hurricane and every storm and every stupid, including 9/11, people we'd get a big write-up in the paper about it. You know, the weirdest thing we did. We also had the Sunday school room was a pet hospital with people, with vets, with people who weren't afraid of animals, you know, and it went on. And we sheltered people for almost 2 weeks in both the hotel across the street and in every place, just for 9/11, because all the airlines stopped. So it's not just hurricanes, it's all sorts of weird things. My point is, churches are uniquely suited to do a bang up job on things like this.
And that's been a big part of the conversation about the communities organized and active in disaster is the other things that can happen during heat. We have more deaths because of heat than we have from other types of natural events, the weather events. And there's the discussion about getting more of the churches available to be cooling centers, because if you look across the county, what is the one type of structure that's all across the county, but places gathering for faith? Now, again, you need to have the power to be able to be available for that. And COADs have been talking to our government agencies about rec centers to be able to be open too. But to be able to have that conversation here about what would this church be available for? And who within the church would be available to help staff that thing? And you know, when you do this thing, how many of you have done something that you were just like, man, I'm so glad I was able to help? You know, there's been a comment made that people who volunteer, they feel good. It's a selfish thing because they feel so good when they volunteer to help others. But we could be a selfish community in helping others in a good way. I think it's funny what people say about people doing good things.
Quick call.
Yeah.
September 4th, at the Women's presentation, that Washoe County is expand the official cooling centers.
Yes, that is part of the conversation. And
The comment was, are we in fact in the process of expanding official recognized and staffed cooling centers? I heard her reference that earlier.
Second, Kitty. It is part of the conversation for the, with the county's climate change plan that they've come up with. That is recognized as being something that they need to do within the county-wide. But then within the city and within congregations, it's, again, who else is available to show up and turn up?
I'm just wondering if there is a list, the gentleman back there talked about being prepared. I live out in the country, and when you live out in the country, you end up no power,
Yep.
cell phone only, everything else. And right now, I've been thinking I need to have a couple trees worked on, especially the ones right over my bedroom. And has your group made up a list of reputable people like that you could trust to come out and do some cutting on your trees? Or
I have the companies that I've used on properties. Yes.
Is there a list available?
No, but I could give recommendations, and that would be a great sharing of information thing.
The city of Gainesville has an arborist that will come out and evaluate your trees.
Not towards Archer.
But he won't cut it down.
No, they won't cut, but they do have a list of reputable, insured, and licensed arborists that will.
Work separate.
Yep. In fact, if somebody would like to pull that list together for us, we will start getting a committee together.
Thank you.
Those are the kind of things that everybody doing a little bit of something will help this grow. As Reverend Donna was saying, the church in Coral Gables was very active. And of course, churches all up and down the panhandle have gotten their churches very active. There's a very large organization of Episcopalians who are ready to assist in disaster. Protestants, Methodists, they have national, regional organizations to do that. We do have a UCC organization. There's actually a guy, John Lipton, maybe, who is organizing within the state, the UCCs, and I'm on call with him to get us to be more at that level of some of the other congregations because we can.
I got a question.
Yes.
I'm wondering about should I say the opinion around here about these generators. After Helene, when I was out of power for 5 days, which was, bad enough. But anyway, my son up in Massachusetts, of course, running things, said that I needed to get a generator. And I just wouldn't do it because I feel as though we're going to be using fossil fuel to take care of all the damage that we've done with fossil fuel that caused the whole thing to begin with. And now we're going to get these generators that are going to make everybody comfortable when it shouldn't have happened to begin with. I mean, I just think they're wrong.
Kitty, do you know that there are several varieties of solar power generators? I've been doing some research on that too, but there are several, like for $3,000, you can get a good size generator and 3 solar panels that would be able to take care of a refrigerator, your TV, your computers. The more that you get, of course, the more it's going to cost, but you don't have to get that plug-in system to the house. And we have that technology to do it better. Of course, you're doing then the lithium thing, but somewhere, anyways, there is that opportunity. And that could be another thing to do a workshop with people finding out which is the best type of generator, solar powered, that fits your house and your needs. Hold on just a minute. Eric's got the mic, talking stick.
I just wanted to follow up on, there's a couple of, you were talking, David, I was going to follow up on your question about tree work, but then somebody else in the front row, I don't know your name, but there's a little bit, I've done a little bit of consulting work over the years on tree work. I'm not in that business myself in terms of being a contractor, but just wanted to say a couple things about hiring contractors to do tree work. And the city and the county both have arborists. As Katie mentioned, the city has an arborist, they'll come out and take a look. The county also has an arborist. If it's on county right of way, maybe they do the work themselves. If, the best, least expensive time to get tree work done is in January. Hurricane season is long over. Everybody spent all their money on Christmas, and tree companies do not have a lot of work happening in January. And so that's a good time if you have saved a few pennies and you need some work done, get it done then. Right now, we're leading into hurricane season. This is a more expensive time to have tree work done. Not as expensive as right after a hurricane, but like the person in the front row said, the time to get the tree work done is now, not like right during a hurricane. And a couple of points about hiring a contractor. As you were saying, ask around, ask your friends and neighbors, who have you had a good experience with? But I will say this, when you do hire a contractor or you're looking for one, get 2 or 3 bids. Pretty much quotes they're not going to charge you for quotes. Get a few quotes, mark the tree clearly that you want them to look at. So everybody, if you're not home and a contractor shows up and he's like, well, I didn't know which tree you were talking about. You're wasting his time and yours. But so mark the tree as clearly as you can. Ask a contractor to show their liability insurance. If they are on the level, they should be able to pull out a piece of paper. And I know I'm a contractor. I've got 14 guys that work for me every day, and we have liability insurance. And you don't necessarily, workers' comp is nice, If you want to spend a little extra money, if a contractor's got workers' comp, that means that's costing him money. I know I pay workers' comp on all my guys. It's not cheap, and especially for tree work. Workers' comp for tree surgeons is like 25%. What that means is that for every 4 guys that are out there working for a tree surgeon, he's got a virtual guy that does nothing because that's his workers' comp payment. So that's what that 25% means. So for every, let's say, $100,000 in payroll that he does, he's got to pay $25,000 in workers' comp insurance. So if you think about that, that adds a lot to the cost of that tree work. Again, I'm not saying that, every tree company has to have workers' comp, but make sure they've got liability. That's a big thing. And their liability sheet, their certificate of insurance, it's going to have a date on it. I can't tell you how many times you look at that sheet and it's out of date. People just say, "Oh yeah, here's my certificate of insurance," but it's expired, right? People don't look at it closely. Look at it closely. Look at the date on there. It's kind of like all your homeowner's insurance. There's an effective date and here's an expiration date. So look at that stuff. That's really critical when you're hiring a tree company, especially if you got limbs or trees hanging over your house. Obviously, you want to hire somebody who's got liability insurance. So anyway, just a
That's
couple,
great,
a
Eric.
couple of things, but definitely rely on your friends and neighbors for experience. If just some random guy driving by with we call him Chuck in a truck. It's somebody with a chainsaw. Stay away from those guys. Try to hire reputable folks.
And just to add to that, if you do, don't walk around your property and look at your service lines, your power lines. If you see any branches that if they were to fall could cause that power to be taken out, call GRU or Clay Electric, because they would want to take care of that now also before it becomes a problem.
And I would add, there was all you said about the contractors and tree roof, the timing in particular, all applies to roofing contractors too.
Yes.
Getting roof done in January is going to be a lot cheaper than getting it done right after a hurricane.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the time, it's 12:15. What I would like to do is be able to identify individuals who would like to follow up with this conversation, because this is a type of organizing that takes more than a half an hour. Today's seminar is pretty much that teaser to find out who would need what, who would be available to do what, who wants to talk further about this. And this is a thing that goes on year round where our countywide COAD group meets, but the responsibility for the congregation to meet is important too. And again, June is a great time to start talking about what we could do. And the heat of the summer, it's a great time to meet indoors. So what I would like to do to take this the next step is if you were able to do anything on one of the capabilities assessment sheets and to include your name and a phone number, I will collate that together and identify who would be interested in meeting another time. How we would meet again, we'd have to identify if there's a day during the week. We could do this as a small group. Maybe we could do a small group during the summer, even though we don't have other small groups then. But I would like to be able to get together before the end of June, which would give us 2 months to talk about what we could meet again. And I don't want to do it after Sunday's service because we have other seminars that are going on. So the biggest thing would be to identify who's available and interested in meeting. And maybe somebody could set up one of those monkey surveys to see who's available at what time. But I'm so happy to see that people showed up today and the feedback. Are there any other comments that people have that they think the value of this is something that they can offer now so that we can kind of feel that presence and that there are people who will show up?
First of all, is there any extra surveys around? And if you're filling it out, I guess, Helen, you want people to give it to you?
Yes.
And please put your contact information on there. There's no spot for it. I was looking for somebody.
That's given,
Here, Ron.
because I've given them all out. I've got this, you could write it on the back. If you don't, oh, Flo, do you have some more surveys? Okay, so if there weren't enough of the capabilities things, if you've got an extra one of these, I mean, just put it on writing and you could put more than one person on one sheet. We'll start creating the community with that.
Good.
I don't think so.
It will.
I think I did like 20 of them, and
And then it, my refrigerator.
maybe I should do that more often, is print fewer papers and more people will show up. It's great.
And then you write your email address on here and I'll send you.
Right. Yeah.
Where did I put that?
Yeah.
I have business cards, actually. So I do have business cards, building community, but I can write it on that if it's easier. Ah,
I'll send you that, screen.
you'll do what?
I'll send you the
But it's been
arborists that
here.
are approved and licensed.
I use, Nimblock.
So this is what the Gainesville arborist sent to me.
Okay. Oh,